All right. What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Systems of Wealth podcast. I am your host, Noah Kronfly. Today, I'm joined by another very special guest, the very first podcast of the 2023 year. Very exciting. It is Mr. Frank Lunn. Frank, so thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Noah, and Happy New Year.
Thank you, sir. You as well. Yeah, from the jump here, I just wanted to say thank you. It's been a real pleasure just to get to know you, to talk a little bit. I mean, it's cool. Like our connection came from really posting like the Systems of Wealth podcast. So like this is one of my very first like real, almost like, I don't want to call it like ROI, but like a cool, real, like something that I can like point at and be like, look at this cool relationship that came out of like me just posting and doing this. And so, yeah, it's a real just joy for me to get to know you, to have a good amount of time just for us to wrap and talk, because we haven't had this type of opportunity yet. And you and I share such a similar passion and almost like belief and values and almost like ethos around finance and our sort of, mission that drives us around wanting to help entrepreneurs around the financial world. So again, thank you for, this relationship, and thank you so much for being on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. And we have to give Cuyler Marshall props
Certainly.
for making the connection. And he kind of, at first I thought he was kind of overselling a little bit. We were, and I thought, wow, this can't quite be like that. And when we had an opportunity, Brian Veter and myself, a chance to meet you, I think, well, he may have actually been underselling a little bit. So it's worked out really good. And what's great is just the opportunity to, go into a project with complete candor and complete, we don't know exactly what's going to happen. And some of the best relationships really happen when, you hope for good things, but nothing ever works out according to plan. It's kind of like the Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Certainly.
And so to start a project, and I'll give a little bit of context around this project. It's around helping business owners and entrepreneurs use something that is typically not a proactive tool in their toolkit.
Right.
Talking about business value and valuation, but it's usually something that happens that entrepreneurs have to react to. And so we're kind of in this place where we're doing a little bit of testing. It's a little bit new, and some new technology, some new methodologies, and it's really a huge opportunity to help business owners in something they don't know yet.
Right.
Which creates an issue and some problems on that. And so we were talking with Cuyler and just asking, hey, we've got this idea, and we have this kind of this thesis of the case, but at the same time, we don't know exactly what we don't know, and we have to work through, and there's going to be some testing. So he recommended, us having a conversation with you. And that's what's been so, edifying, and something we're so grateful for is your approach, which is not like just this, quid pro quo of this for that. And, what I would call kind of a mercenary approach, which there's nothing wrong with that. There are definitely experts and gurus, and, you need to be able to do some, we're going to pay for this, and we're going to get this. And at the same time, there's some kind of long game experiments with, we don't know what exactly this is going to be. And we're not looking for this just, quid pro quo of, this much input for this much output.
Right.
And it's hard because especially, we all have businesses, we all have expenses, we all have needs. And so you have to kind of balance that a little bit of this is what I do for a living. And then there's always a little bit of skunk works, or the opportunity to try something in the so crazy it just might work. And if it doesn't work, it's still pretty good. We're going to learn something from it.
100%.
My mom had a little needlepoint plaque in her kitchen when I was growing up. It said, "Even my failures are edible." And that's kind of an approach with this business, and thinking about how do we help business owners and entrepreneurs. So I just want to give you kudos and
thank you.
And thank you for, even though we're still early in this experiment, but to come about it in full, partnership and collaboration, to really just see what we can do to help educate, to help create value for others that are just like us, the crazy ones that are trying to seven-figure businesses on the way to eight figures,
Yes.
and just wanting to do the best we can, but we don't always know the things that we don't know.
100%. No, that's really good context, and thank you so much for, the kind words. I greatly appreciate it. And I think it was something interesting. I mean, I said it on one of the first times that we and all, got to talk together, but like for me right now, like where I find myself is like, I've viewed this around business for a while, that like I've pursued curiosity and just learning, and
Mhm.
businesses were like a playground for me to almost like hone the skills. And I
Yeah,
think this is something I want to talk to you about, is like the phases, almost like levels of entrepreneurship, of how you kind of
mhm,
expand and where you start. Because I think, I mean, you said it right. Like at the beginning, we're all very, I know I wouldn't say all because I don't like the generalization, but I
mhm.
know I was quite transactional. Like it was like I put something in, and what is it in it for me? Like what do I get,
Right.
sort of. And I mean, we all, I think we all kind of start that place.
Mhm.
And I think as I I wouldn't even say like got more success or matured, I just had more experience, that like I started to sort of, I think personally I transformed, and professionally I went into like, how can I help clients transform
Right.
their business and think in a very long-term time horizon, and playing games with long-term people like we always talked about. And I always felt like I almost like, what's the word? Like attracted you guys like into my
Right.
life. Like, like I manifested this relationship of like, because
Absolutely.
you came to me with like something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, which just is acquisition and business valuation, and
Mhm.
playing at that level, because I just don't quite have that experience yet, around people that love and want to speak the language of like finance and money, and how it plays a
Mhm.
role in just financial education for entrepreneurs. And
Yes.
you and I and Brian and like the rest of the team speak a similar language around just people that like, other content that we consume, people that we're fans of, and like, look at the
Mhm.
different knowledge that we've all kind of, collected at this point, and how can we find a similar path for us to just implement and test and tweak, and ultimately coming from a place of like, yeah, let's provide real good value for,
Yes.
people, especially like I really, I so was like aligned and loved your own personal backstory of just how you, where like your, where your journey came from, like wanting
Yeah.
to do this. And that's another big part of what I want to talk to you today. So we'll get into all that.
Yes.
I knew this was going to be a really good episode. I'm already in, like I said, before we started recording, I'm anticipating you being a repeat guest, because there's just so much that I want to talk to you about. But obviously, like I said, you have listened to a handful of these podcasts. One, again, greatly appreciate
Yeah.
that. I still like, it's so weird for me that like people listen to this stuff. Like I just, for me, I was like, I just want to talk to people that are so cool, doing cool things. Like, and I'm
Mhm.
going to put it out there, and if people find value, great. But yeah, I think it's still like, it's new for me to even think about that. But where I like to start with this is sort of the
Yeah.
first question of like, when people ask you like, what do you do, sort of
Yeah.
like, how do you frame that? Like what do you say is like kind of your title? How do you frame that?
Well, it's so funny you ask that, because like if you ask my wife, like, what does Frank do? She
Right.
would say, he kind of does this, and maybe it's around accounting or some other things, and
Yep.
she doesn't really know. And clarity is not always my skill set. I'm like a big idea guy,
Yep.
and so sometimes that's my biggest challenge. That's my kryptonite, is how do I take the simple things and or the complex and make it simple.
Right.
Now I can do that for other people. I just have a hard time doing
Mm,
it for myself.
yep.
So I think for me right now, looking at Kahuna Business Group as it currently is, it's about empowering exponential entrepreneurship. And the thing that really excites me the most is for the business owner, the business builder that sees themselves as an entrepreneur, that's building something that's different than themselves, that they're not a
Mm,
proprietor, sole proprietor, excuse me. They're not just building, owning their own job, but they're looking to build and create something,
yes.
maybe for a short time horizon, or for a longer. And the other thing is they're not the center. So if you liken it to a Broadway production, I'm not the star of this production.
Right.
Now every now and then maybe I'll get a cameo, like right now I'll get to be in it, but it's not about me. It's not revolving around me. It's not about my expertise, but to be able to help understand in that journey of entrepreneurship. So looking at somebody who's the star of the play, and everybody else that they hire, their staff, their team, is the supporting cast. There's nothing wrong with that. I
Mhm.
uh, totally appreciate that and get it, especially in this economy.
Yep.
But there's a small select group of crazy entrepreneurs are out driving their headlights.
Mm.
They're just they have this, either like in our case, Kahuna accounting and value, it all stemmed from mistakes that I made and big, huge issues that I wish I would have learned. But I did learn. I learned the hard way. So now
Yep.
hopefully others don't have to.
Right.
And looking at how do we create a business to help other people. And that's one of the things that really, just when I knew this was the right relationship to go forward, was you were interviewing your mentor, Scott Shang,
Yep.
and you're talking about Zig Ziglar, whom I love. Zig Ziglar. And that's really, I got a chance to hear him back in the 90s in
Oh,
person.
wow.
And he had
Nice.
a sayings that you can get, you can have anything in life you want if you just help enough other people get what they want.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
kind of became for us our tagline of, we achieve our victories through the victories of those we serve.
Mm.
And that
Wow.
really, when I heard you and Scott talking about that, I was like, all right, bingo, yes, let's do this. And then not only that, not only getting to meet you, but now I've also had the opportunity to talk with Scott,
Yeah.
and that level of relationship. And of course, we're all in, Planet Perry and the universe that Perry Marshall has created,
Yep.
which is so fantastic. And um, his beliefs and his practices that, of course, we all now understand and utilize. So it becomes really nice concentric circles of just different things that we all believe that are so important to help other entrepreneurs and other business owners.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I've always said this, and I feel so grateful that like Scott is a big part of my foundation and that that's who I started with, because he passed on a lot of that stuff to me. And hats off to Perry Marshall as well. Like for me to be
Oh
able
yeah.
to start as a young, 20-year-old learning the
Crazy.
foundations from Perry,
Yeah.
and like not have to get a decade into my career and then be like, oh my goodness, like a lot of the stuff that I've, believed and, to be true, I don't have to go back and unlearn. I can start that from a
Mhm.
very just like seeing business in like a very real frame and a real sense. I think that's so valuable. But
Oh
on the
yeah.
frame of like, or on the thread of mentors and kind of going back to like how you got started in entrepreneurship, like where did that come? Did you have an entrepreneur or a mentor that kind of got you started? Like where did your entrepreneur journey sort of start?
Well, mine was kind of like, I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always
Okay.
been decent at selling, and a lot of it's just having ideas. And to be a good entrepreneur, I think we have to be just a little bit delusional, self-delusional, not to the point where we need to be institutionalized,
Yep.
but to the point where we don't always accept reality in the same
Yes.
way, because otherwise we just wouldn't start. I
Right. The
mean, where
reality
most
that's like
people.
presented to us.
Exactly.
Yes.
So to be able to have an idea and kind of work through that, and I knew early on that I wanted to be a business owner, to have my own business. And
Hmm.
this actually started, the business that we're in currently started back in 1995. I was still
Okay.
working in the convenience store industry, and there was an opportunity to, my big project that I was working with was off-premise ATMs.
Okay.
And so I started the business. Now it started as Community Merchant Services Inc., to be able to help business owners with credit cards, because back
Okay.
in 1995 or so, a lot of businesses still didn't take credit cards.
Right.
So we
Goodness.
started that, but I knew the ATM thing was starting to boil into a bigger opportunity. So for a couple of years, I kept my day job,
Hmm.
and this was a side hustle for me. And then in 1997, it was right to the point where I knew I had to make a choice. And so I quit my, at the time, really good job, company car, all the other things. And I went
Yeah.
full time into this business with
Wow.
a couple of business partners at the time.
Okay.
And I was kidding with our lawyer and said, if this ATM thing works out, it could be the big Kahuna. So the name Kahuna, he crossed off Nuco and wrote Kahuna,
I love
and
it.
just stuck as a brand. So we had this the brand
Oh, that's
idea that
rad.
came, thinking about like the wave crashing,
Yep.
and it really just became about, at the time it was your world, your wave. So
Mm.
taking personal responsibility and opportunity. And it just worked because in the ATM industry, everything was kind of a three-letter acronym, something
Ah,
MS, like merchant services,
right.
IMS, UMS, BMS.
Yeah, of course.
And so for Kahuna, it just stood out. And then going to different trade shows across the country and getting to meet people, and it's like, hey, it's the Kahuna guys. And the brand stood out, and we were able to build that. and in a creative way to build the business around an opportunity for just joint ventures. And so we were
Hmm.
able to partner with the different manufacturers and the different vendors in the equipment space and the processing space, the vault cash, and then be able to take those deals and opportunities and work with a very fragmented group of distributors and sales organizations, independent sales organizations, and be able to create a value add for both of those groups and
Wow.
just kind of be in the middle.
Yeah.
And we built that to about a 23-24 million dollar revenue business over
Goodness
5 to 6
gracious,
years.
Frank. Oh my
And
gosh.
it was a rising tide lifts all surfboards. It was great timing. But the things I made
Wow.
two really key errors,
Yeah.
or unforced errors. I mean, I think a lot of things went really well, but there were two things that if I was going to go back and coach my younger self,
Yep.
it would be one, accounting, which is not my forte. Accounting was not my love, bookkeeping
Right.
and accounting,
Yep.
but accounting has a ton of power in it if you can use it for forward-looking dynamic guidance. But you just have to understand a little bit of the principles and understand what you're trying to achieve so that you can align and calibrate and coordinate what you're trying to achieve in your vision and your mission and your goals and ambition.
Yes.
Everything in your business flows through your accounting.
100%.
So even if you don't love accounting, the debits and credits and all of those things,
Right.
being able to just look at it as a system
Hmm.
that can help you to find efficiency from where you are to where you want to go.
Yes.
And I learned that the hard way. And then the other thing I learned the hard way was about business value. So we built this
Mm.
business and I had no idea, no intentions of selling it. I was just wanting to grow it. I mean, I had visions of being $100 million business.
Right.
And we got to a place where one of the biggest clients that we had, and we had helped them to grow and really collaborated with them, and they decided that they wanted to sell the business, sell their business.
Hmm.
And so they found a venture capital group and private equity, and they were working through this. And they said, "Guess what? We're going to buy Kahuna too." I said, "Oh no, we're not doing that." And basically, it was, "Oh yeah, you are." It was a deal we couldn't refuse. And
Mm.
it really had to do with we had built so much business through this other company. They were a large part of our business.
Right.
And most of our business model at the time was really about volume. So if they left, our volume would have reduced and it would have created kind of a catastrophic series of events.
Right.
So they were right. We ended up having to sell. And it
Interesting.
was a nice, I mean, it was a good 7-figure exit,
Of course.
but it should have been an 8-figure exit. And there were a lot of things that I learned the hard way because by the time we knew that we were going to have to sell, then we ended up getting a valuation. It cost us, almost $12,000 to $15,000 to get that.
Goodness.
But what was worse was once we had it, there was no time to do anything, no
Right.
time to use it. It was like locked in amber.
Right.
So
Wow.
the thing that I learned, and of course, this was back in 2010, 2011.
Okay.
A lot of things have changed in the last several years with
Right.
technology. And so after we sold that business, we decided to really retool our business to provide accounting and other business services, not so much again about the mechanics of being and doing accounting,
Right.
but to help organize and execute accounting to be dynamic guidance to where the business owner, the entrepreneur wants to go.
Yes.
And then a big part of that really was about value and looking at, just as an example, like in real estate, before Zillow came out, if you had a property, you had to have an appraiser come in and pay for a full-on appraisal.
Right.
Right now, if you're an investor and you're looking to buy real estate, you could go to a specific place and look at a zip code, and you could look at all of the information that's out there on public
Mm.
records, and you could get a pretty good idea of what any specific property costs
Right.
based on, again, the market data and things like that. Well, there's a lot of the same things that are available now related to to business value. And so again, most business valuations in the past were very expensive. It was very bureaucratic, and it was very much reactive.
Hmm.
Something happens. I need to buy your business. You're getting a divorce. You're getting married. You're bringing a partner in. You're taking a partner out. You're recapitalizing. And all of those things, could be the impetus for getting a valuation.
Right.
But it's very rarely done to say, how do we take this business? And the really key, like, secret thing about value is, in a lot of ways, it's kind of like in the Lord of the Rings, the one ring to rule them all.
Mm.
Because to really take the value of a business and to maximize it to the utmost, you have to do all of the things that you would normally need to do to improve the business in a way that's going to give you the maximum value for that.
Right.
So in a way, it's kind of like if you understood, what is the value today, what's the value potential, and what do I need to do to maximize that value? Well, to maximize the value, you're going to do everything else that's going to maximize the intrinsic value for you as the current owner.
Yes.
That's the other thing, is to
Oh,
look
that's
at
beautiful.
whether you're looking at somebody else to buy it, you're buying your own business. Every day you don't sell it,
Wow.
you own it. You're buying
Oh,
it.
I love that.
And so how do you maximize it? You're going to own it. So, it's funny because, like, we have a commercial real estate building that we're in. We own the building, we lease it.
Yep.
And every now and then you kind of think about, oh my gosh, buildings, any type of buildings have headaches, and they're, this happens or that happens.
Right.
Maybe we should just sell it and then we don't have to deal with it. But the funny thing is if you're going to sell it, you still have to fix all those things anyway.
Certainly.
So why not fix it and do what you need to do to maximize your enjoyment and use out of it?
Yes.
And it's the same thing with a business, is to be able to look at a business and say, okay, right now, good, bad, ugly. I mean, and there's different ways to look at value. I mean, there's enterprise value, which is kind of like all of the things working. And the other thing is value is very, very subjective. It really is what somebody values. So like if you have a business and it owns property, and the business isn't worth anything, but your property is sitting on mineral rights or something, well, then there's value there.
Yep.
But you don't always know what those are. So the thing that we're trying to do right now is help business owners think a little bit more strategically about the strategic value of the business today and in the future. And then what do you need to do to maximize that so that you can really optimize your business and it's the most profitable, the most efficient. And as long as you own it, then it gives you the most leverage, the most freedom to do the things that you want to do.
Right.
So you're not in the situation that I was in back in 2000, 2011, 10 or 11, where I was forced to sell and I had no leverage points at all. It was just, this is what it is.
Yeah. Wow. That was fantastic. Seriously, Frank. And there was so much that you touched on just now that I want to go back. Like that was a big part of like my own personal motivation around systems of wealth was like how, from a professional standpoint, but also personally, like how money plays a role in how we almost just like perceive life and the decisions we make. Like I've always felt like money affects the jobs we take, where we live, the people like we marry. Like, I mean, that's a really big financial decision, like where we travel, how we travel, the food we eat, the gyms we go to, the people that we interact, like all of that stuff. And then that's just like personally, but then how it affects us as a professionals too. Like, cause entrepreneurship, like we get into this because, I mean, you said it, right? Like you notice an issue or you're dealing with your own personal issue or problem, or you see it in the marketplace. And then you're like, all right, I'm going to solve this. Oh, great. I did that. Let's see if I can just continue to do that for more and more people. And like, you don't really think about the money sort of side of it. I mean, yeah, I mean, like we all, I think people get into this of like, yeah, I want to have my own business, but I think true like longevity in entrepreneurship comes from like doing something like that you're like, okay, I do want to solve this problem. And sometimes people go like, well, the money and the accounting and kind of that stuff, like, it's not my skill. And then they just kind of accept that. And like, accounting and that finance is just like the language of business. I mean, it is so important to like, it's been so important to me. And as I got deeper into it and I really had to work on my relationship with it, and I saw just other people struggle with it, I was like, oh, this is my little piece of the pie that I can carve out and be like, all right, this is where I can help. Like, I truly know like this is where I can spend a lot of time helping. And then, so that, again, I loved you touching on that. But then the other piece of it of like, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, that like it's like going back to sort of like the valuation or like, learning like the levers to pull of like how to either increase like, the actual like outside value of someone looking at acquiring your business, but just your own sort of feeling towards the business too, like costing you more to not like it's costing me more money to not scale to X amount of dollars than it would cost me to acquire the information I need to know in order to get to that. Like it's costing you
Right.
more money to not know the value of your business than it is of like what it would cost to then invest in somebody that can show you what this is, because like equity and value and all that stuff, it
Mhm.
may not seem like a whole lot. It may not seem very important until it really is important. And then when it is
Yes.
important, oh boy, like
Yeah.
does it
By
become
then, it's unfortunately, it's sometimes it's too late,
late,
you know?
100%. So yeah, I really, again, I love you touching on that because I think that, again, I think it's something that, since you and I have gotten to interact and talk a little bit more,
Mhm.
you've helped almost, and I heard this from somebody recently, I think it might have been Hormozy, he talked about like the singe moments where like something that you hear over and over and again, and then all of a sudden it just becomes like, you finally let it like really marinate and you're like, oh my gosh, this clicked and it totally
Yes.
makes sense, is like looking at businesses as vehicles basically to like build wealth, essentially like an
Yes.
asset that you're using to build wealth over, for yourself. And like,
Mhm.
again, I think the idea behind that is the going through the process of solving certain levers or issues in your business and making it more valuable to somebody that might acquire it makes
Mhm.
like it's like playing the game better. Like the book Built to Sell, which I mean, I know like where
Oh, yeah.
everyone's so such a big fan of, is like the process that he went through of like kind of tooling his graphic design business, made it more efficient and put it in a position to get acquired. But
Mhm.
he also just had a better time running the business and
Yeah.
just enjoyed it more. And I was like, oh, that's so like the marrying of the two of like, I am building this asset that somebody would want to acquire and possibly sell someday, or well, yeah, that I would want to sell, but also then just playing the game of business
Mhm.
better at a higher level, at more velocity, at a better clip, bringing in hiring team members and all that stuff, and just playing at a higher level. I loved just that the
Oh, yeah.
connection between the two. I think that's such a powerful concept for somebody just to really understand.
Oh, and you are so right on the money. Because the one thing that a lot of times business owners, entrepreneurs, even just high high income people forget is affluence does not equal wealth.
Hmm.
In a lot of cases, affluence can be a huge detractor of wealth.
Yeah.
And so when you look at
Yeah.
your business as an asset that creates both current income, if you're the business owner and you're working in the business, and also future wealth, there's some duality there.
Right.
And I think one of the things that we find most, I guess, prevalent along the way, and it's exactly what happened to me, is not being intentional. So
Hmm.
there are a lot of questions in a discovery process to understand about yourself and your business and whether you have partners. And there's no right or wrong answer. And it's not a, this is good, this is bad. But if you don't know, then you're just drifting. And instead of drifting, we want to be able to help people design and be intentional. So
Yeah.
even just understanding, like, what is my time horizon?
Right.
Do I have a desire to exit, or do I just have a desire to maximize it so that whenever I do, I have options or potential? Because if this is my
Hmm.
wealth vehicle, then it is a part of in the systems of wealth to be able to leverage and understand, either I'm going to cash this in or I'm going to leverage it into something else. And
Yep.
like if you're playing Monopoly, I'm going to take my 3 or 4 houses and turn them into a hotel
Right.
and create more cash flow.
Yes.
So again, whether those things are, what's most important to you as a business owner and entrepreneur, that's not for us to say. But
Right.
what's for us to say is, look, you need to consider these things.
Right.
And that's really, like we talk about like Perry Marshall. Perry's a guru. Totally get that. I mean, he's got just strong ability. And I used to hate that word guru, but there
Hmm.
are people out there that are gurus that I feel like so strong. They are great. John Warlow,
Yes.
Roland Frazier, Perry Marshall.
Yes. Right.
There's some great gurus out there. My mentor, you asked before, his name is Dave Fries.
Okay.
He's a guru,
Yep.
and he's in Perry's world and knows
Hmm.
Cuyler and everything else like
Oh,
that.
awesome. I love it.
But for us, our goal is to not be a guru to tell
Hmm.
people about accounting or to tell them what to do, but it's to help them ask better questions and help
Yes.
them to understand when we talk about aligning and calibrating and coordinating to your vision, mission, goals, and ambition. That's really what's important, is to
Hmm.
understand what that is in both sides.
Yes.
So knowing what's important to measure, is it about growth? Because some people, like if you ask a stadium full of entrepreneurs, you know who here is excited about growth? And they're like, oh yes. Who here is excited about profit? Oh yes, yes. Okay, well, you kind of have to choose, because you can't go after growth and profit at the same time.
Mm,
Because if you focus on growth, your profit
wow.
and your cash flow are also going to be impacted.
Of
If you're
course.
focusing on profitability, then your growth is going to be restricted. So
Absolutely.
it doesn't mean you can't have a bias like, hey, we're 70-30 growth versus profitability. Or like you think about like an Amazon back in the day, they were losing money. They had revenue out the wazoo and growth, but their profits were nowhere to be found.
Yep. Right.
But that was part of their strategy till they made that switch. And then with Amazon Prime and some other things, then they turned into this, behemoth of profitability. So what's
Mm,
most important though is to understand what is important to you,
right.
so that you can have an intentional plan. Because again, what happens for most business owners and entrepreneurs is, I'm just going to do the best I can. I'm going to serve clients. I'm going to go out and create these programs. I'm going to do this and do the best we can. And it kind of just becomes average.
Right.
And what we want to be able to do is say, look, you kind of have to choose. What do you want to focus on? That doesn't mean you're stuck with it. You can change. You can be,
Yes.
I'm all about growth till we get to this level. Once we get to $1 million in revenue, now we'll start to focus on tooling in profitability, so we can get to this place where we want to be at $1 million plus with a 20% margin.
Right.
And whatever that is, then you can align and calibrate that
Right.
through your accounting to see how are we doing? What do we need to do?
Mm,
Much like a GPS is, hey, here's where we are, and we have 6 hours to go. And if we're going to continue on at this pace,
right.
we should be there in this time or fashion. So
Yeah. That's
it's
great.
it's not any more complicated. A lot of times, I think with business owners, entrepreneurs, we get caught up in the crazy, the things of like accounting and finance we don't know. It becomes kind of like voodoo magic, and
Yep.
because we don't know debits and credits and other things.
Right.
But it's really in its simplest form. It's just, how do you know where you are? How do you have ideas of where you want to go?
Right.
And how do you know if you're on track or off track with that?
Yes.
And
100%.
that's the thing that we can do with accounting to make it simpler. And
Mm,
again, it's not about what system you're using. It's not about anything specific other than, where are you now? What do you want to measure? What are the things that are important to you?
mm,
Those become your kind of your guide stones,
right.
having a North Star to know what you're trying to achieve, and
Yes.
then just knowing whether you're off track, on track. And it's the same thing with value. I look at valuation really as about potential. To me, value
Mm,
equals potential. Value equals future. Value equals what it's worth to me, but it's also what it's worth to somebody else.
right.
And looking at it from an outsider's perspective and say, what are the things that would make this more valuable to somebody else?
Right.
Is it the customer list? Is it the quality of your staff, your team? Is it your geography? Is it your niche? I mean, there's
Mm,
all kinds of things. And again, for us, it's not about saying you need to do this, you must do this.
right.
It's about helping people to see what's important. And then once you have that understanding of what's important through that discovery process, then it's just about measuring and seeing, are we on track? Are we making the strides that we need to?
Right.
And if there's a specific, like, I plan to sell this business and I want to sell, and make this much money so I can turn that into an annuity to pay this much for the rest of my life
Mm,
and wealth, well, then it's great.
great.
Now you can do some backwards planning with that.
Right.
So a lot of what I see us doing in our collaboration with you is, it's really about ATRFQ, ask the right effing question.
Yes.
And F, I mean, it's about focused, ask the right focused questions,
Yes. Oh, that's
so that
beautiful.
so that you can be intentional about those things. And that's
Yes.
the one part that I feel like a lot of times, like, I didn't know.
Hmm.
I was all about, at the time, growing revenue, new
Right.
relationships, new opportunities. I'm opportunities everywhere.
Right.
FOMO, like my middle name. So, oh my
Dude.
gosh.
Yes. Right.
But if I would have been a little bit more intentional about the
Mm,
questions that I asked myself and then my executive team, if we would have looked at it, we probably would have made a lot of decisions differently. We
interesting.
would have still focused on growth, and even though it was low margin, once we got to a certain place, we would have started to look at and say, okay, now how do we start to find better relationships that actually have some profitability, and using this to a certain point to grow, not only just growth for growth's sake, but
Right.
now growth for quality and for profitability.
Yeah.
So a lot of, unfortunately, as entrepreneurs, this is the one weird thing about us that's so different that most people just never understand. But most people, most businesses, most executives, they strive to get to that level of competence where I got this now, I'm here, I got this. But as business owners, as entrepreneurs, not business owners, as entrepreneurs, we strive to get to that level of competence and understanding. And then we purposefully move ourselves right out to,
Right.
I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out.
Yep.
And I'm going to work with, no,
100%.
I'm going to work with Terry or Dave
Right.
Freeze or somebody to
Yeah.
figure that out. And that's what's unique about us, is we're
Yeah.
not afraid to put ourselves into, because a lot of times for most traditional business owners, it's ready, 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 aim, aim, ready, 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 and eventually fire. For some of us, it's like fire. Okay, now I need to aim a little bit and get ready.
Yep.
And that's probably not good. I mean, I wouldn't, like, kids, don't try this at home, because I've made so many mistakes that were unforced errors that are kind of like, um, but at the same time, to be able to know that, look, I don't know what's around this next bend. I mean,
Yep.
I feel really comfortable that I built this business to this level.
Yep.
I want to go to this level, and I've never been there before.
Right.
And that's where having, your Perry Marshalls or your mentors, having Scott and people who have been there before,
Yep.
they're not going to do it for you, but they're going to be able to say, hey, Noah, before you do that,
Right.
you might want to think about these things, because
Yes.
it's not this panacea of once you get to this place, everything's going to be great.
Right.
That's one of the biggest misconceptions.
Yeah. We have the illusion. Yeah. That when we get to that level, finally,
Right.
all my problems are going to go
Oh
away.
yeah. When I get to 7 figures, everything's
Yep.
going to be wonderful. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh,
Oh
no.
boy.
Yeah, because you're too big to be small.
Yep.
You're too small to be big.
Yeah.
It's that weird, like, purgatory of entrepreneurship of,
Yeah.
how do I escape this and
Right.
get enough velocity to get to that next level?
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that's really, really hard.
Yeah. I want to talk about like that, the different stages to go through. There's a few things that you touched on that. First off, I want to talk about is like one, the sentiment of asking yourself better questions, or sort of like take that is not an easy exercise to go through. Those questions are not like quick answers, and it's usually like people will spend an hour kind of thinking about it. But I think that's so applicable to every area of life, just like being intentional and fulfillment and finding alignment. And like, because I know for me, when I was first getting started, like the world of digital marketing or internet marketing is very noisy. It can be very noisy. And so I, again, feel very grateful that I found Perry and was able to, he cut through the noise for me, because he was talking about things that were deeper than just like how to scale your business and make more money. That for me was so important. And I didn't know that like that's what I was looking for until I found Perry. And it's not like these are the answers. It's sort of like, these are the right questions to ask yourself to get you closer to what the answer is for you, and specifically for you. Like, it only needs to make sense to you, and it doesn't need to make sense to anybody else. And that's totally okay. And having confidence in going after those targets for you is, again, one of the hardest things, like as an entrepreneur, is like, you see all these other people either posting wins or doing these things, and they're doing cool things. And you're like, how come I'm not experiencing that? But it's not that you're not experiencing it. It's just your, like, the way that you're framing it and your perspective on it, it may be off. And so for me, like, being able to, like, I told you this story, and hopefully I'll be able to talk to Jeff Brown at some point, but he was an investment guy that Scott introduced me to. And we got on a call and we were talking, and I was talking too fast, like I usually do, because I was super excited. And he said, Noah, like, you need to relax. You don't even know the right questions to ask yet. And it's always stuck with me. It humbled me very quickly, but it put me in a position to be like, yeah, he's right. Like, I don't even know what it is that like I'm going after yet. And you get so frustrated. But then, like, how are you measuring it? You don't even, like, what's your target? And then, okay, that's the target. Like, can we put some constraints and some systems around that to make sure that, like, you're not just flailing all over the place? Like, all that stuff, again, I think it's just, as you elevate through this process and you get a little better and you make your own mistakes, but also have people that have gone down that path a little farther than you that can present some of that stuff to you. So yeah, I want to go through like some of these levels. And I have Perry's newsletter that he published in November last year, because he kind of laid out the 5 phases, and I really like this. And so I want to go
Mhm.
through this a little bit with you and kind of
Sure.
get some takes and see what you think. So his first level is the freelancer. This is 0 to 100,000. So for me, that was like, thankfully, yeah, like that like I've graduated that level, and that was basically just like stacking skills and having a place to like basically get compensated for your skills. Everybody
Right.
like poo-poos getting paid for your time, but like I don't know how else to start. Like
No.
when you're getting
Yeah.
started, I think a service business is the best place to go with it. And having a skill and being able to like then basically, like if we look at what money is, right? It's just a tool to signify an exchange of
Exactly.
value. So if you become
Exactly.
more valuable, you increase your value, you can exchange the value that you have for usually like you're not really starting with like an info product business. You don't have any experience. Like you don't know what you're doing yet. So for me, it was like finding other people that like had businesses and being able to basically like, what
Mhm.
problems do they have? How can I solve those problems for them? Is that
Right.
what was your similar like experience for kind of that first level, the freelancer?
Well, I kind of skip that because
Yeah.
well, my situation's been a little bit different where I kind of relish in the fact that like I literally am the dumbest guy in the room. And when we started our ATM business, everybody learned, how to be a technician and was really good about being a technician.
Yeah. Right.
And I did everything I could to avoid that because I didn't want to be locked into that. I wanted to be able to be a little bit outside.
Yep.
So when we started our business, my focus was to be the visionary,
Mm,
and this was a little bit before. Again, this was back kind of in the 90s. So a lot of things have come about now with EOS and vision and other things. And visionary is one of those weird words where it kind of sounds arrogant, and I don't mean it that way at all.
mm,
Because for all my good visionary, I'm really good at seeing, extrapolating out and seeing things that most people can't see.
right.
But I also have the failings that people that are really good at doing the incremental pieces, like I'm a really good starter and not a great finisher. So I've
Right.
had to learn a lot of skills there. So I kind of skipped the freelance part because I was never trading my services in that way.
Interesting.
I guess that's probably when I kept my job.
Yeah.
I was doing different things, but I was still
Essentially that. Yeah.
figuring out how to iterate this
Oh,
business.
that totally makes sense. Yeah. Okay. I like that. The next step that he has, or the next phase, is the bootstrapper. This is 100K to 250K. And that's kind of where I find myself right now, is sort
Mhm.
of like I have this, a portfolio of clients. I have a good service. I've stacked some skills now. I kind of know what I'm
Yeah.
doing. And like this, where like you kind of hit that, where I hit my ceiling was like, okay, I can only scale my time so much. I can only trade
Right.
me so much. So I kind of find myself in this sort of productizing a service around, I like this, like I think being a sort of, solo consultant kind of in this arena or in this level is nice because you have some monetization methods of like either, you can have like a flat retainer fee, you can do kind of a one-off project fee. Like if I do a landing page or
Right.
a funnel, I can charge a one-off. But I also kind of got into the like revenue share equity kind of
Yeah.
piece of like, okay, now that as a business grows, there's incentive for me to look deeper into, solving their, real problems and really focusing my time on the revenue generating activities. So like
Yes.
that's kind of where I find myself right now. And then I know the next level that he has beyond this is the entrepreneur. So that's 250K to a
Mhm.
million. And really the advice that he talks about in this is sort of like, okay, at this point, you have some USP, you have some product market fit, but really becomes like systematizing and putting a team together. And I know
Yeah.
that's something that that is a skill that I have. I know that that's a big part of my next step. And I
Right.
feel like I'm aware of it. So like I know why I'm not breaking, through like the revenue marks, because like I know what it is that's holding me back. So it's fun. I can point at it and be like, oh, it's
Mhm.
team building and it's finding good personnel and sort of, building like operations around me, and rather than just being like, oh, I'm going to be the one to do it all. So I know that
Yes.
like that's there for me. But what was your experience with like hiring and building out a team and sort of like letting go of control almost in a sense?
That's the fun part for me. Now it's a
Okay.
little bit weird because I guess, the arc of my career in entrepreneurship is I've been at the less than a million. I've been the a million to 10 million. I've been
Yep.
10 to 20. I've been down, sold off
Right.
businesses. And I've had seven figure exits, and I've had like exits where I've had to pay people, so it's it's messy. And the funny thing is, you were talking about bootstrap to 250. I'm thinking, wow, we're where we are right now, we're bootstrapping again, even at $1 million, and going back through some of these phases and
Yeah.
thinking like, oh my gosh. But really the organizing and executing around a vision is what's really exciting. And I think sometimes we get into this preconceived notion of what it needs to look like.
Yes.
And it used to be, I think, much more, where it's like, I'm going to hold everything close to the vest,
Right.
and I don't want people to know because they may take my ideas or their secrets. And
Yep.
I've really come to learn that ideas are easy. Execution is hard. And so
Well
as you
said.
start to look at that, especially looking at relationships as joint ventures and saying, everything is a value exchange. If I just look at, say, a relationship with you and say, okay, I'm just looking to buy you at wholesale, and I know what you can do, and I'm going to sell it at retail, and I'm going to make the margin, and you're getting what you said you wanted, Noah. So
Yeah.
just be happy,
Right.
be quiet and be happy. Well, that might work for an iteration or two, but that's certainly not going to build a long-term relationship with us.
Yeah.
So being able to look at and say, I look at it much more catalytic and saying, Noah is fantastic. He's awesome. And if we can figure out how to be catalytic and help Noah's awesome get to that even awesomer level, that's a technical term, awesomer.
That's
And it helps
entrepreneurship.
us in the same way. Then now we're talking about a value in an exponential. And I mentioned before about
Yeah.
exponential entrepreneurship.
Yes.
And I get in trouble sometimes because of my buzzwords and things like that. But just to break it down, empowering is different than just guiding or telling people. Empowering is to give somebody else back the power and to support. And so for us, it's not about, like you had mentioned before, it's not about telling people what they need to do, but it's empowering them to understand what's most important to them. And
Yes.
then exponential, when we talk about like the J-shaped curve and those kind of things, exponential is not just about growth. It's not just about money. Exponential can be whatever is important to you as the
Yes.
entrepreneur. Now, it probably will have a component of growth, but it
Right.
could also have a component of freedom, of contribution.
Right.
Exponential has so much more to it than just this. I mean, the technical term for, or the technical definition for exponential is an increase with an increasing rate of increase over time.
Right.
So it's like compound interest is
Yes.
exponential.
Right.
And sometimes, we stumble. We have to figure things out on the incremental, and then incremental over time can lead into exponential, where we, start to try and figure out, like, how do we just get to exponential from the get-go without putting in the work at the beginning? Well, that's difficult.
Yep.
But I think, again, looking at like a relationship like we're forming, where you've got your autonomy and we've got our autonomy, and we're
Right.
moving together in certain areas. And if we figured out our downsides, like if this thing totally fails and all of our assumptions were wrong, all right, what's our downside, and are we okay with that?
Right.
And at the same time, if we look at this and say, okay, if we can expand this and provide this value to the people that we want to serve, what's possible? And
Yeah.
from there, to be able to look at, we don't have to figure everything out. We just have to
Right.
kind of figure out to that next curve, and then we can go forward from that.
Yes.
So, and then entrepreneurship is the other part of, so empowering exponential entrepreneurship. Not everybody's wired to be an entrepreneur. Some people find themselves to be more traditional. Some people feel like, I'm not an entrepreneur, but I can be entrepreneurial. And that's another word that I think is a little bit loaded, where not everybody is that natural born entrepreneur. And the archetype of, when you say the word entrepreneur, who do you think of? And for some, it might be a Steve Jobs, or it might be an Elon Musk, or something like that.
Yep.
But it's different. And so if I say, hey, Noah, do you feel like you're an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial? And if so, tell me how. What's important to you may be a little bit different than what's important to me, but that doesn't negate either of our feelings.
Right.
Just kind of a definitional piece of understanding of, hey, in this game of business,
Right.
it has a lot of the same rules. And that's back to the language of accounting, the language of finance. How do we understand? And really, if we want more, how do we give more? How do we deliver more? So if you want to increase, in the J. Abraham way, you can either increase transaction size, increase transaction cycles, the
Mhm.
velocity. Outside of that, I mean, it's kind of a standard thing. And so we just need to say, how do we take what we're doing and serve the people that we want to serve better?
Right.
And one of the things I love about you is when we first started, the very first thing he says, we need to really hone who are we serving? Because if we try to serve everybody, even though everybody I think needs what we have,
Right.
we're not going to do a good service to the people that we know we can serve, because we're going to speak the language that they really need to hear.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to actually touch on that a little bit. I think this is like cool learning for anybody that's like watching this right now. And it's like, it's fun for me to go through this discovery process with you guys of almost like, it's cool to document this. Like, this is what we're working on. This is what we're doing right now. So the process that I'm taking them through is sort of the discovery of, first and foremost, like honing, like you just said, who it is that we're serving, like that avatar.
Right.
And the whole point of that is really to, again, identify problems, like, solving problems, like a need in the marketplace, but it's really coming down to like, instead of us making assumptions into what we think that they want, like, let's really understand what it is and then serve them and just give them what they want, what they're already, sort of looking for. Like, that's the whole point. So it starts with like the offer, the avatar sort of discovery and offer creation. You guys, I think, have a really, really solid offer, and we're sort of, experimenting that, or at least continuing to kind of peel that away more and more. And then it becomes like, okay, we have sort of idea of who we're going after, what we're offering to these people, where are they, how are they hanging out, and how can we basically attract them to us. So it's a very simple process. Of course, it's simple, but it's not easy in like actual execution. And we're going through that process right now, which is very fun.
It's like golf or losing weight. I mean, it's super simple.
You know what you do.
Yeah.
You know what you need to do.
The fewest number of hits to get the ball in that hole, or, less calories and overtime. I mean, simple,
100%.
right?
I want to touch on a few more things before. So Perry has talked about this, and you just kind of talked about like the purgatory level of kind of getting to that 7-figure, like the esteemed sort of like mystic mirage of 7 figures, that 100K a month, right? Like getting to that level. I remember the first time I was around, this is a side story. I remember the first time I was around my buddy Danny when I moved to Vegas in 2020. I was living in a house with a couple entrepreneurs, and my buddy Danny was doing 100K a month. And I was like, it changed. It really, like, that moment really changed everything for me. Cause like my concept of time, my concept of leverage, hiring the right service, like all of that stuff. Like, I was like, man, this guy is doing in a month what it takes me to do in a year. Like, everything changed. I was just like, man, this is so wild. Cause 10K a month is like the big number that gets thrown around. And then 100K a month was like, I don't even like, it's so hard for me to conceptualize, like it was. And I was just like, man, I just don't understand how he's doing this. And to like see it and point at it and really like feel it, man, this is so wild. But then, you get there and inevitably you run into more issues and more problems. And so Perry talks about like the 7-figure desert. And for me, it was really interesting to think about like the multiple that a business gets at a 7-figure kind of run rate, right? Like the 1 to sort of 5 million, like the multiple that you can get on that compared to what you can get on a $10 million business is massive. When I like, that's not probably like, we don't even have like the word to describe the discrepancy between how big that possibly is. But like in your experience, like what's some of what are, if you can pin it down, like the pitfalls that people experience kind of at that 7-figure run rate, that purgatory that you find yourself in, like where you're, like you said, like you're operating at a fast clip. And when you're just getting started, like the information you get works because you don't have really anything going on. But information at that level, the wrong information, is probably even more costly than the right information. Because if you implement the wrong thing, you are wiped off the map, and all of a sudden, like, you're in a big world of hurt. So what's been like some of your experiences just operating at kind of at that level?
Well, the biggest thing that I found kind of the hard way, and these are just mistakes, these are unforced errors that you tend to make, is you tend to over rely on buying things or expenses, and you don't really keep those in check. Because when you're first starting out and you're bootstrapping and you've got a credit card or something, it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. And then once you start to have revenue coming in, it's kind of like the consumer side where they start making, which is a bad thing. But like when they start talking, you start hearing car commercials where it doesn't say this is $30,000 a year. They say it's only $278 a month for so-and-so months. And you start thinking about it from a cash flow perspective, and that makes sense. But when you think about it, and I'm guilty of this, so I mean, I just want to be flat out candid that I am learning this the hard way as well. But for $1 of expense, let's say, if you're at a 20% margin, you have to make $5 to be able to have that $1.
Yep.
So if you save $1, that's $5 you don't have to make. And what happens when you first kind of get to that run rate of, now we're $1 million business, and we're going, I'm going to hire somebody, I'm going to hire these things, I'm going to do this. Well, you add an employee that you really don't need, or you're not quite ready for, and that becomes essentially a real restriction for what you can do, and it hampers cash flow. And I think I've found this, and it's so much easier for me to look at somebody else's business than it is to do it for myself.
Of course.
And right now it's like, oh my gosh, why do I do this? So whether it's subscription or other things, and not really question it, you just get a momentum of expenses.
Right.
And then you start to, for a minute, you start to think like, maybe I'm smart, maybe we've made it, maybe I'm, and not to like beat yourself up and whip yourself and everything else, but to have a little bit of that clarity moment and say, okay, do I really need this? And what's really important? And is this going to help me achieve the things that are most important to achieve?
Right.
And I'm finding like there are times now where like, okay, I should have been able to do this better for myself. Now I have to do it. It's hard. But that's that place where as you get to the 7 figures, you feel like, okay, when I get there, it's going to be so much better because we're going to have money flowing, and you do have a velocity of cash flow, which is good, but that can also really easily cover error, cover some flaws in your thinking, cover some chinks in your business plan or your business model.
Yes.
And so it's kind of like the plate spinning. It's all good,
right?
Or musical chairs until the music stops. And you realize, oh wow,
boy,
I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that's great. Because I like that too. Because again, it goes back to sort of what you're talking about of like starting almost like the Stephen Covey sort of 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, like starting with the end in mind. Like if you have like that, what your like target is, then like how to build to that a little bit better, and like you're not running into like those types of those same sort of issues. And I guess like for me being still, I'm turning 26 in a month, right? So like me being very young in my entrepreneur career, something that I want to tell people that are, either playing at my level or just, hopefully this is one of those moments where you hear it and it clicks, is like the things that got me to 10K a month are not going to be the things that get me to 100K a month. They're not going to be the things that get me to $1 million a month. Like those are different levels, and it requires you to have different inputs, different leverage, different skills. You just play the game differently. You have to look at things differently. If I could go back and tell my younger self that same sort of thing, because like brute force got me to 10K a month of just all out full clip. And now in order for me to like, quote unquote, scale. But again, I think defining for me now, like a big part of last year was sort of like, well, what is it that I actually want to do? What do I want to spend my time on? Like, what do I want my life actually to look like? And in pursuing those questions, I found a little bit more harmony and alignment and fulfillment and sort of what I was looking at my business. And it also allowed me to point at, what is it that's holding me back? And I knew that was like, oh, okay. It's like sales and marketing, working on products, hiring a team, all that stuff. And I was like, okay, now that I know sort of what's holding me back, I can go to work on fixing sort of like my own issues or my own errors and how I'm thinking about things too. So again, very, very important. The last question I want to end with here, and again, I'm going to have you back on because we didn't even get to talk about like your personal like philosophy and values. And I'm sure there's like books and reading, like there's so much that I want to talk to you about still. And anybody that's listening, obviously you guys can tell why I vibe with Frank so much. And he's just going to be, I know there's going to be such a fun partnership, but I want to leave you with this question or ask you this question. Like, how do you, not even necessarily in a business sense, but almost like personally too, like how do you define wealth? When you hear the word wealth, how do you define that?
Well, that is a great question, because that was one of the things that I learned early on. I don't know if I have it right behind me, but I have like The Millionaire Next Door and some of the other books. And
of course,
I'm a big believer in wealth over affluence. I mentioned that earlier because unfortunately, a lot of people get caught up in affluence. How much money do I make? Things like that. And what's funny is you can be poor at $1 million a year. And I know people would have a hard time believing that, but if you do, just think about some of these music people or, TV stars. They could be making $1 million a year and
Yep.
actually be poor.
Yep.
Because with that, you can get yourself into debt. You can do other things.
Yep.
But you can also, you could be making $10,000 a year, and which for most people, that'd be below poverty. And you could actually be wealthy, be able to have assets that produce for you. So the key for me about wealth versus affluence and looking at wealth is about having assets that can produce and being able to do something once, and then that can create additional cash flow or additional revenue.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be a big home run, like I'm going to do this and I just made $1 million. It could be something where I'm able to just buy a little bit of this asset, or to be able to save, or to be able to have something. And it's about having your lifestyle in a way that you don't have to be. I mean, unfortunately, like if you're, you use the term like for people who are six-figure people, or high six figures, that have to have the six-figure car and the six-figure country club,
right,
and the six-figure house, which is actually a seven-figure house, and all of those things. Man, it just is so wealth depleting.
Yeah.
And they're not really important.
Wow.
No, I mean, there are some exceptions, and I don't mean to judge, because there may be reasons for that.
Right.
But for people who just look to say, I want to be able to take care of my family, and I want to be able to do things in a way that what I have now is going to be able to produce more, and creating that compound interest of success,
Yes.
versus the compound interest of failure,
Right.
which is depleting. And it's really a mindset. There's
100%.
like I said before, a great book called The Millionaire Next Door by Thomas Stanley. And it essentially says there are people who you would never, ever know they're millionaires, because they don't live lives like that.
Yeah.
They
My
may
favorite.
have like a wealth or a waste business, and
Something
they drive
boring.
a pickup truck that's
Right.
secondhand, and it's like they're boring.
Yeah.
I love boring.
Yes.
Because
that's great.
it doesn't take, when I have a downfall, or not downfall, a downturn in the economy.
Yep.
It's much easier to support a life that's not affluence based.
Yes.
So I think that's one of the things with your systems of wealth. That's one of the things I really loved, is being able to help people, business owners, entrepreneurs, inside entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs.
Yep.
How do we help people? And the number one thing you can do is get rid of debt. Debt is bad, especially personal debt. I mean,
Bingo.
I use debt for leverage. That's the only place like where I look at Dave Ramsey and I disagree. Is I believe debt is valuable for business. It's a tool for me.
100%
for most people that I know.
Yes.
But personal debt that I'm going to buy something that I want now, but I don't have the money for, and I'm going to do it over time through a firm or one of these companies. That's bad. Don't do that. So the enjoyment won't be there once you're still paying it off, 64 months after you get done using it. So
that's great. I love that. I mean, it's so aligned with sort of my own sentiment. I think wealth, like I've gone back and forth on how I define it for myself, but and I love this from Taylor Welch, who I know I've brought him up in the past. Like he defines it as like having an abundance or enough of like whatever it is, the thing that you want that makes you happy. And I think that's so simple. It's like, if you want a lot of time with your family, if you want to have space to go on vacation or go travel, or if you want to go, I want to be able to have, like, for me, like my wealth that I like achieved or like felt recently was like, I want to have Wednesdays where I don't take phone calls and I can go to a coffee shop and work on a Wednesday afternoon. Like that is beautiful to me. And one of the podcasts that I did, one of the first ones with Rob Kepke, who is also from the Perry Marshall world, that was his advice too, was avoid personal debt. And paying down my debt last year gave me like a freedom of like experiencing life of just like peace of mind. It gave me control over one of my greatest assets of just my income source. And I think this is a quote from Naval Ravikant, that like people that live below their means get to experience a freedom that like most people just don't, if you're experiencing it that way. Because it really is like what you said, like it's not necessarily about making 10K a month or 100K a month. It's the ratio between like what's coming in and sort of your burn almost in a sense. And if you can continue to expand that, because I think wealth truly is something that you accrue slowly over an amount of time. And you get to a point where like my idea was sort of like, I am the end or the output of the wealth equation for me is time, right? Like
Mhm.
I was able to like sort of get an idea of what my lifestyle is. And I see, okay, this is the amount that either like I have to have actively invested that's earning me a yield to earn this
Right.
amount of money. And it's not necessarily that like it's so I can get this amount of money. It's like, okay, well then like I get all my time back. Like, oh,
Right.
it's this amount of money to buy all my time back essentially. Like that's something that I
Yeah.
can get behind. That's
Wealth
something I
equals
can pursue
freedom.
again. 100%.
Yeah.
So like, again, that comes
Exactly.
down to like having the target. It gives me alignment. It gives me fulfillment. I can set my goal. I can look at my road. Like I don't have to worry about anybody else's scoreboard. It gives me just total peace to go after the life that makes sense to me. So again,
Absolutely.
like, and the other way that I've defined it too is like the inner realization, almost materialization of like your own abundance of like how you feel internally. So like because
Yes.
it's peace of mind. It's like
Yeah.
having, like you can't, I guess the other thing that I really love about it too is like I am after stuff that money can't necessarily buy, like
Right.
a quiet mind, a healthy body, like yes, like space and time and some of that stuff, like a happy
Right.
household that,
Yeah.
like money plays a role in that, but like real love, like the other thing about it is like maybe my car isn't like, a real expensive car, but what's happening inside the car of like listening to music and having a good time, like that
Mhm.
doesn't really matter what kind of car I'm driving. So like I love
Right.
that. I love that type of that. I mean, again, we're not judging anybody because I love watches and I'm gonna buy
Yeah.
watches in my life because I know like that's just something that I like. But again, like I think it's just defining it only like that specific thing for yourself and then just relentlessly going after it and not feeling like it has to make sense to somebody else or I'm
That's
doing it
awesome.
because of somebody else. Like I'm
Yeah.
doing it because I want to.
And that wealth gives you freedom. It gives you contribution. And I think
Yes.
that's another part of,
Yeah.
there are people, and it really, it's kind of a litmus test of, people either leave you a little bit higher or a little bit lower, or maybe a lot higher, a lot lower. And trying to spend time less with people that leave you lower.
Yep.
But more importantly is making sure that you're the kind of person that's always going to lead people higher.
Oh,
How do we
yes.
edify? How do we build up? How do we be accretive with other people to help them be better? That automatically helps us to be better. But if we're just trying to take because we need to take and divide instead of multiply, that's to me is that kind of the essence of what empowering exponential entrepreneurship
Oh, that's great.
is being able to be a multiplier and a force multiplier, not just
Wow.
a additional.
Yes, man, that's fantastic. Let's leave it there. Let's end it
All
there.
right.
Frank, seriously, we're gonna have to have you back on. There's so much more to talk about, and we'll probably have to do an update on what we've been working on and some of our own
Yes.
discoveries
Our,
and
our
put
secret project.
and pushing that forward. Again, Frank, thank you so much for jumping
Thank
on.
you.
This was
Blessings.
immensely valuable. Thank you so much. Anybody that's listening, watching, make sure you guys leave us a comment, give it a like, share it, tell a friend about it, leave us a review. To all my builders out there, I salute you. Frank, thank you
Mhm.
again. And I will see
Thank
you guys
you.
all in the next episode.
All right.